The Rothschild Blueprint. How one family mastered the art of funding, both sides. To truly understand the modern era of conflict, we must move beyond the rhetoric of nationalism, ideology, and territorial disputes. The deeper, darker truth lies in the ledger books. The common narrative states that nations fight wars for belief. The conspiratorial truth suggests they fight wars because a select, secretive group of financial dynasties funds the debt required to fight them. This series begins not with a king or a general, but with the family that perfected this dark art, the Rothschild dynasty. The Rothschild story is the foundational blueprint for how financial elites manage global conflict for profit and power. He strategically placed his 5 sons, Amschel, Salomon, Nathan, Karl, and James, in the 5 major European financial capitals: Frankfurt, Vienna, London, Naples, and Paris. This network was the first truly international, independent banking system, loyal only to itself, and perfectly positioned to thrive amidst the coming global chaos. The proving ground for this system was the Napoleonic Wars, 1803-1815. While Britain battled the French Empire, Nathan Rothschild, operating out of London, became the key financial agent for the British government, organizing the massive loans required to finance the Duke of Wellington's army. Crucially, the Rothschild family's centralized private intelligence network was faster and more reliable than any government's. While one brother funded the coalition forces, other arms of the family maintained financial ties that allowed them to profit from the necessary movements of money and resources across war zones, treating the conflict not as a disaster, but as a vast, risk-managed business opportunity. By operating above the laws of individual nations and placing their network beyond borders, the Rothschilds made themselves indispensable. When the wars concluded, they owned significant portions of the national debts of the victors and the vanquished alike, securing their family's position as the primary financial creditors to the entire European continent. They simply needed to finance the rulers. The Rothschild blueprint, which saw crisis as an asset acquisition opportunity and conflict as the ultimate debt generator, would be copied and adapted by every subsequent financial dynasty seeking true global power, setting the stage for the world wars and beyond. The American debt machine, the dynasties that fought the Civil War, and the rise of J.P. Morgan. While the Rothschilds were consolidating their grip on Europe's national debt, as explored in Part 1, a new, equally ruthless financial landscape was emerging across the Atlantic. The mid-19th century American conflict, the Civil War, 1861-1865, was a brutal test case for the monetization of total war, demonstrating how powerful, emerging American financial dynasties could exploit national division to secure unprecedented influence over the nascent U.S. government's economic future. This conflict accelerated the shift from European dominance to a powerful, centralized American financial class, led by titans like J.P. Morgan. The sheer scale and cost of the Civil War presented an existential challenge to both the Union and the Confederacy. Unlike European wars, which were often financed by existing royal treasuries and old-world banking networks, the U.S. government, still in its infancy, lacked the deep reserves needed for a modern conflict. This necessity created an immediate, desperate reliance on private financiers, paving the way for the rise of a new oligarchy. The key financial player to emerge was J. Cook, often called the financier of the Civil War. Cook mastered the art of popularizing government debt, selling massive amounts of Union war bonds directly to the American public. However, his operations were inextricably linked to and supported by the larger, established networks, many of which had deep European ties. Cook's firm, and others like it, did not just raise money. They became partners with the government, dictating terms and establishing a dangerous precedent: that the national interest could only be secured through the intervention of private, wealthy individuals. More critical to the long-term conspiracy was the strategic positioning of figures like J.P. Morgan. While still young, Morgan's early career involved controversial financial maneuvers during the war. He famously engaged in arbitrage, profiting from the differential between gold and paper currency, and was involved in securing and financing crucial supply lines. Morgan and his associates understood that the true, lasting profit was not in the immediate wartime supplies, but in the permanent debt infrastructure that the war created. They saw the conflict as the perfect opportunity to bind the U.S. government permanently to private credit. The debt generated by the war was astronomical. The Union debt alone rose from $65 million in 1860 to nearly $2.7 billion by 1866. This mountain of debt needed to be managed, refinanced, and guaranteed. It was here, in the restructuring of this immense sovereign debt, that Morgan and his contemporaries, often working in concert with European financial interests, cemented their power. By positioning themselves as the indispensable guardians of American credit and stability, they gained the power to influence policy, currency, and economic direction long after the cannons fell silent. Furthermore, the American Civil War highlighted the cynical practice of profiting from both sides. While documented evidence of direct official funding from the same bank to both the North and the South is complex, the reality of supply and commodity speculation was clear. Northern financiers profited immensely from the Union's spending, while clandestine European and Northern merchant networks engaged in highly lucrative trading of Southern cotton and blockade running, ensuring that the flow of goods, and thus profit, continued despite the conflict. The American Civil War confirmed the Rothschild blueprint on a new continent. The financial elite does not care about the flag. They care about the interest. The war was the furnace that forged the modern American financial state, centralizing power away from regional banks and state treasuries and into the hands of a few powerful New York-based dynasties who would go on to shape the 20th century's global conflicts. The Federal Reserve Coup, how central banking was created to finance perpetual war. The critical weakness exposed by the American Civil War, Part 2, was the lack of a centralized, independent mechanism to manage massive national debt and control the nation's money supply. While the financial dynasties of the late 19th century, led by figures like J.P. Morgan and the Rockefeller interests, had gained immense power through wartime financing, they sought a permanent institutional structure that would ensure two things: stability for their investments and an unlimited, controllable source of credit for future government expenditures, particularly those related to conflict. The result was the most significant financial conspiracy in modern history, the creation of the Federal Reserve System in 1913. The narrative taught in schools is that the Federal Reserve was created to stabilize the economy and prevent bank panics. While this was the public justification, the hidden purpose, orchestrated by a secretive meeting of the nation's most powerful financiers, was to ensure that the U.S. government would never again face a war it could not instantly finance through debt, effectively removing all political constraints on engaging in large-scale military conflict. The planning for this financial coup took place in November 1910 during a secret meeting on Jekyll Island, off the coast of Georgia. Attending this meeting were representatives from the Rothschild network, the Morgan banking empire, the Rockefeller interests, and other powerful financiers. They met under conditions of absolute secrecy, using pseudonyms to disguise their identities. Their goal was to draft legislation that would create a private central bank, disguised as a government agency, capable of issuing currency and controlling interest rates, a power traditionally held by Congress. The resulting Federal Reserve Act, passed under immense political pressure and public misdirection in 1913, achieved their objective. By establishing the Federal Reserve, the financial elite secured the ability to create credit ex nihilo, out of nothing, allowing the U.S. government to finance its expenditures, including wars, without the painful political process of direct taxation or relying solely on limited gold reserves. This system fundamentally transformed warfare. It changed the question from "can we afford this war?" to "how much debt can we sustain?" The timing of this centralized control could not have been more opportune for the financiers. Just a few short years after the Federal Reserve was established, the world plunged into World War I. The Federal Reserve, acting as the primary financial engine, allowed the U.S. government to raise massive amounts of debt instantly, primarily through the issuance of Liberty bonds facilitated by the same private banking houses that drafted the system. The war became the first major financial bonanza under the new central banking model. The bankers profited immensely, not just from the fees associated with underwriting the bonds, but from the interest on the monumental debt the nation suddenly incurred. This system proved that the most powerful form of control is structural. By controlling the mechanism that controls the money supply, the financial families ensured that their role as indispensable creditors was permanent. They had successfully privatized the most crucial function of the state, the ability to create currency and credit, guaranteeing that every future war, every future global crisis, would be financed through a system designed to concentrate wealth and power in their hands. The Federal Reserve was not a stabilizer for the economy. It was the ultimate engine for perpetual debt and profitable war. The global showdown, the funding of World War II and the rise of the Petro-Dollar families. World War I had proved the devastating profitability of central bank-financed warfare, Part 3. However, World War II, 1939-1945, was a conflict of an entirely different scale, a total global war that required not only vast amounts of credit, but also unprecedented control over essential global resources. This conflict marked the moment when the existing financial dynasties, like the Rothschilds and Morgans, partnered with the rising giants of oil, industry, and strategic commodities, most notably the Rockefeller and later DuPont families, cementing a new, more expansive financial-industrial complex that profited obscenely from the deadliest conflict in human history. The complexity of funding Wielded demanded a financial structure that could operate across warring boundaries. The historical record reveals disturbing instances of financial and industrial cooperation that transcended national loyalties, primarily driven by the need for continuous profit and the protection of long-term investments. American corporations, often with deep ties to the aforementioned banking families, maintained commercial relationships that effectively aided the German war machine up until the U.S. formal entry into the war, and in some cases, even beyond. This included crucial financing and technology transfer that provided key materials and patents necessary for fuel, rubber, and munitions production. The conspiracy here is not just about banking, it's about industrial integration and strategic resource control. The Rockefeller Empire, built on oil and now intertwined with chemical giants, understood that oil was the new gold, the indispensable resource for modern warfare. By controlling the global flow of petroleum and the necessary credit to purchase it, the Rockefellers and their allies secured a double-edged profit. They funded the governments that fought the war, and they supplied the essential fuel required for the tanks, planes, and ships. The war was the catalyst that fully established the Petro-Dollar system's supremacy, ensuring that future global economic power would be tied directly to oil controlled by this powerful American dynasty. Furthermore, the post-war financial restructuring, the Bretton Woods Agreement, 1944, was the ultimate victory for this financial industrial complex. Held before the war was even officially over, this conference effectively dismantled the dominance of the British pound and installed the US dollar, backed by oil and the Federal Reserve, as the world's primary reserve currency. The major participants and architects of Bretton Woods were directly linked to the financial families, who had profited most from the conflict, including representatives from the Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department. By making the dollar the bedrock of global trade, they ensured that every future international transaction, particularly oil purchases, would ultimately flow through the financial system controlled by the American elite. Thus, World War II was not just a fight against fascism. It was a strategically managed phase of economic transition, allowed the financial dynasties to transition from the old world model of funding royalty to the modern model of funding global industry and global currency control. The immense debt and industrial reorganization of the war firmly established the permanent, profitable alignment between the state, the military, and the private financiers who held the purse strings to the world's most critical resources. The stage was now set for the Cold War, a half-century of continuous, immensely profitable military spending managed by this solidified complex. The Cold War cash cow, financing the military-industrial complex and the rise of global debt. Following the financial restructuring of World War II, Part 4, the nature of global conflict transformed. The direct existential battles were replaced by a sustained, decades-long geopolitical standoff, the Cold War. For the financial dynasties and the industrial giants they controlled, this was not a period of uneasy peace. It was the ultimate continuous cash cow. This era formalized the military-industrial complex, a term coined by President Eisenhower, but whose financial roots lay deep within the private banking and industrial empires established in the preceding centuries. The conspiracy shifted from capitalizing on temporary crises to securing perpetual, guaranteed profit through state-mandated defense spending. The core of the Cold War profitability was the necessity for both the US and the Soviet Union to maintain a relentless, high-cost arms race. The Western side of this race was financed almost entirely through the system established by the Federal Reserve, Part 3, and executed by the banking and industrial families. The government became the single largest, most reliable customer for the private sector. Companies like those tied to the Rockefeller interests through strategic resources, and new defense contractors, often financed and advised by the powerful banking houses, received vast, non-competitive contracts for weapon systems, intelligence gathering, and nuclear technology. This guaranteed revenue stream fundamentally changed the dynamics of political influence. The financial elite no longer just waited for a war to happen. They structurally ensured that war readiness became the permanent state of the economy. Through intense lobbying and the placement of their own members into key government and defense advisory roles, the so-called revolving door, the financial-industrial complex guaranteed that the annual defense budget would always escalate, regardless of the actual threat level. This created a profitable, self-perpetuating cycle where fear of the enemy justified immense debt creation, and that debt flowed directly into the pockets of the interconnected financial and industrial elite. A crucial development during this period was the rise of the international debt infrastructure, managed by institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, IMF, which were born from the Bretton Woods architecture. These institutions, heavily influenced by US financial policy and staffed by individuals with deep ties to the private banking world, extended massive loans not just to rebuild Europe, but to finance and influence developing nations, often pushing them toward Western spheres of influence and creating dependency. When these nations defaulted or faced internal instability, they often became theaters for proxy conflicts, which in turn required the US to ramp up military intervention and defense spending. A perfect, self-fulfilling prophecy of profitable conflict. The Vietnam War serves as the ultimate financial case study of this era. It was a prolonged conflict, financed entirely through debt, that yielded no clear victory but generated immense, sustained profit for the defense contractors and the financiers who underwrote the government's borrowing. The war was so costly that it forced President Nixon to decouple the US dollar from the gold standard in 1971, giving the Federal Reserve and its private controllers even greater, unchecked power to print currency and finance future global expenditures through pure fiat money. A monumental win for the financial elite who benefit most from currency devaluation and sovereign debt. The Cold War cemented the conspiracy. The financial elite had transitioned from funding empires to financing the permanent state of global tension, guaranteeing continuous profit from the manufactured necessity of an endless arms race. The threat of war became as financially valuable as war itself. The new paradigm, the collapse of the USSR and the financialization of global conflict. The sudden dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991 presented the global financial elite with a profound existential challenge. The Cold War, which had been the perpetual cash cow for the military-industrial complex, Part 5, was over. The primary external enemy was gone, and the justification for massive, guaranteed defense spending vanished overnight. However, the financial dynasties who had perfected the art of profiting from conflict did not retreat. Instead, They engineered a new, decentralized paradigm for profitable conflict, pivoting from monolithic state rivalry to the highly lucrative business of global instability and financialization of war. The core of this new paradigm was the immediate exploitation of the former Soviet bloc. Western financial institutions, often controlled by the same powerful families, flooded the newly free states with capital, often leading to rapid, chaotic privatization, the infamous shock therapy. This process systematically transferred massive state assets, oil, gas, industry, and strategic resources, from public ownership into the hands of a small group of politically connected oligarchs, many of whom quickly became deeply indebted to Western banks. This secured a new layer of control, the financial colonization of formerly independent states, creating new markets for Western goods and new theaters for debt repayment. Simultaneously, the geopolitical justification for conflict shifted from ideological struggle to humanitarian intervention and the war on terror. This shift was crucial for the continued profitability of the defense sector. Instead of a single, massive enemy, the new paradigm created a perpetual series of smaller, more manageable, and therefore financially continuous conflicts in the developing world and the Middle East. These conflicts, financed entirely through massive debt instruments and the unchallenged fiat currency system, post-1971, required the constant purchase of advanced, high-margin weaponry and logistics, ensuring the revenue streams of the defense contractors did not falter. Crucially, the financial elite introduced the concept of global financial war. The conflicts of the 21st century became less about conquering territory and more about controlling strategic choke points and global resource flows. The oil dynasties, Rockefellers and their allies, continued to dominate, ensuring that the post-1973 Petro-Dollar system remained inviolable. Any nation attempting to trade oil outside the US dollar system immediately faced economic sanctions, or often direct military intervention. The conflict was no longer merely about communism versus capitalism. It was about the defense of the dollar's global hegemony, a project directly beneficial to the American financial dynasties. The rise of private military contractors, PMCs, was the ultimate expression of this financialization. PMCs, often owned by entities with ties to the same established financial and political networks, transformed war from a state function into a profitable, outsourced service. This move eliminated government accountability, lowered the political cost of deployment, and guaranteed massive, non-competitive contracts paid for by US and allied government debt. The financial dynasties were no longer just the creditors. They were also the direct service providers for the war machine, profiting on every single bullet, security detail, and logistical operation in the new profitable wars of instability. The collapse of the Soviet Union was thus framed as a victory for freedom. But for the financial elite, it was the necessary step to dismantle the old state rivalry and pivot to a far more decentralized, pervasive, and financially rewarding system of global conflict management and debt-driven global control. The stage was now set for the final phase, the complete fusion of state power, finance, and technology in the modern era. The final frontier: debt, technological control, and the future of profitable conflict. This 7-part journey has traced the financial conspiracy of conflict, beginning with the Napoleonic Wars and the Rothschild blueprint, progressing through the central banking coup of the Federal Reserve, and culminating in the profitable destabilization of the post-Soviet world. The final question is not merely who funded the past, but how the financial elite is positioning itself to profit from the conflicts of the future, focusing on the nexus of unlimited debt, technological control, and the final financial frontier, space and cyber warfare. The foundation of the entire system, built across 2 centuries, is uncontrolled debt. The U.S. national debt, facilitated by the private Federal Reserve, now stands at unprecedented levels. For the banking families and their allies, this is not a sign of failure, but a sign of ultimate control. As the debt escalates, the government becomes exponentially more dependent on the private creditors for survival. Every time the government raises the debt ceiling, it is a formal public acknowledgement that the financial elite's control over the state is absolute. It guarantees the perpetual flow of interest payments, diverting national resources away from public services and into the private accounts of those who hold the credit. The next great wave of profitable conflict is being managed through technological consolidation. The old military-industrial complex, Part 5, has evolved into the techno-financial complex. Today's defense spending is less about tanks and more about cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, AI, and surveillance technology. The companies leading this technological push are deeply intertwined with the same powerful financial dynasties, guaranteeing massive government-funded contracts for systems that serve a dual purpose: national defense and domestic control. Conflict funding is now directed toward securing control over data and communication pathways, the essential infrastructure of the modern state. The most critical future frontiers are cyber warfare and space. Conflicts in these arenas are inherently difficult to verify, perpetual in nature, and require massive, immediate, and politically unquestionable financial investment. The privatization of space defense and the relentless funding of cyber offensive and defensive capabilities guarantee that the financial elite will have a new, endless stream of profitable conflict opportunities, regardless of traditional peace treaties. The business model remains the same. Use the threat of an unseen, powerful enemy, be it a foreign cyber unit or a rival nation's space asset, to justify limitless debt and direct that capital into private hands. Ultimately, the secret history of money reveals that war is a tool of financial engineering. The five families and their successive allies did not necessarily want to see people die, but they understood that mass conflict is the most powerful method for achieving three non-negotiable goals: the concentration of capital, acquiring assets during chaos and managing the resulting debt; 2, centralization of power, making the national government dependent on private credit, the Federal Reserve model; 2, control of resources, securing dominance over strategic assets, oil, technology, information. The great conflicts since Napoleon have not been fought to secure freedom. They have been meticulously financed to secure financial dependency. As we look toward the future, the war machine is quieter, more integrated, and more pervasive than ever before. The debt is the battlefield, and the financial elite remains the only group guaranteed to profit from every shot fired, every financial crisis, and every future frontier. The conspiracy continues, not with armies, but with interest rates and lines of code.